The return of a traditional blue and white game for Penn State is going to have a huge boost for recruiting.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into a live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. My name is Zach Seyko, your host, and I am joined by a very special guest, and that is the recruiting expert himself over at pennstate.rivals.com, and that is Dylan Callaghan Croley. Dylan, it's great to see you again, and the exact person I wanted to talk to when it comes to the next wave of players coming to Happy Valley.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on the show, Zach. And yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, there's really no time to waste here. We'll just kind of break this down simply. It's going to be the impact of Penn State's recruiting as far as what blue and white, what a spring game does. And there's other events, but this is kind of the first one that sets that next wave for the class of 2024. And it's never too early for 2025, 2026, but you're want to solidify 2024. And then the names that are going to be there, also importantly, the names that are not going to be there, that are going to be missing out from what you know. But Dylan, let's start here. Penn State getting a traditional blue and white game back this year. And when we say traditional, we really mean dividing up the teams, having kickoffs, not as full live contact, but you're going to be getting Bo Prabula on one side, Drew Aller on the other side, basically a split of the first string and second string against each other, scout team versus the first team. And what do you think? What kind of impact does that have on recruiting?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, first of all, it gives recruits a kind of like a showcase of what to expect out of a Penn State offense if they were to come to Penn State, or a Penn State defense. And I think another aspect of it is, I think with it being more of a traditional game than what we've seen over the last few years, I think the fans are going to be a little bit more into it than the last few years. And I think that's going to have an impact on the atmosphere of the blue-white game on Saturday as well. And I think that's going to appeal to recruits as well. But I think for the most part, it gives recruits a great idea of not just what to expect out on the field if they were to become an Nittany Lion, but also the atmosphere that they can expect on any given Saturday in Happy Valley. Of course, a spring game, it's not going to be as rowdy as maybe it will be when West Virginia comes to town in September, but it's going to give a good taste of what is to come in the future for Penn State.
And I think it gets pretty close, right? A lot of these other schools, Texas in particular, bragged about, we had 40,000 people come to our spring game. And James Franklin and Penn State are like, okay, we had 70,000, close to 75,000. I honestly expect there to be more, just with the weather. It's supposed to be 75, sunny, perfect conditions. It's something that there's excitement around this group. There's Penn State's going to be in the top 5 when the preseason polls come out. When that first poll is finally released for the AP top 25, they're going to be solidly in the top 10. And I think that brings the excitement of it. But when you say that crowd atmosphere, I think it gets pretty close. You're only about 30,000 off from a regular Penn State football game.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you on that. And I think the expectations coming this year is even going to help Saturday's atmosphere as well. I mean, Penn State has had some great teams in the past under James Franklin. They've had some high expectations coming off, 2016 and 2017. But I'm not sure expectations have ever been like they have been this offseason. I mean, I've not been one to beat around the bush on our own podcast over at Happy Valley Insider. If Drew is the real deal for Penn State, the sky's the limit for this team. This is a team that could, without a doubt, make a run into the college football playoffs. And once you get there, you see if you get to a national championship. But this is a team that can win a Big Ten championship, get to the college football playoffs. And I think the fan base has that expectation this year. The expectation is that they should go out and beat at least one of Ohio State and Michigan, if not both, and be competing for a Big Ten championship and the college football playoffs. And I think that's going to raise Saturday's atmosphere even more because the expectations are that high that people are just excited to see what the Nittany Lions are going to look like out on the field this year. This, of course, is the first year that Drew is going to be the starting quarterback as well. What is Drew going to look like in this spring game? What is Bo going to look like in the spring game? The quarterback competitions are always fun as well. Plus, there's a great crop of newcomers on the field as well for fans to be excited about.
Yeah, we'll get to that list in the upcoming segment. Dylan, just in the past, when you've talked to recruits about their experience at a blue and white game or any of these high profile recruiting events for the Nittany Lions, what is the takeaway? And we know what the potential could be of that traditional, hey, it's blue versus white. It's the first team versus the second team. There's going to be actual legitimate scoring. It's not going to be, oh, it's a 3 and out, 2 points for the defense. It's still... James Franklin seemed cautiously optimistic, right? He wasn't like, yeah, traditional game. We're so excited. At first he was, but then on the back end, when he was asked about it most recently, he was like, yeah, that's the plan. And that's really all he said about it. But so with the way that it's been over the past, I would say 5 or 6 years, I was watching highlights from the 2014 spring game when it was Christian Hackenberg and James Franklin very early in his tenure. So over this past slate of the more concise blue and white games, how do the high school players and the recruits look at it, the families?
Yeah, I think what stands out to them is the fan atmosphere for the most part. I mean, it's very rare in college football to have the type of fan support that Penn State has for a spring game. I mean, you look around and it's probably not the best comparison, but Michigan had their spring game a couple weeks ago on April 1st. It wasn't the best of weather days, but they had very little attendance that game. And I would like to think that Penn State, on the other hand, even if on Saturday it was, in the 40s with rain throughout the day, I still think Beaver Stadium would be somewhat packed with fans because this fan base just bleeds and dies with Penn State football. And that does stand out to recruits. Recruits feel that energy coming out of the stands. They feel it around them, and that stands out. But also the atmosphere that James Franklin has created around his program, what they get to see on game days. They don't get to see everything, obviously. They don't get to see inside the locker room, but they can feel that atmosphere and family-like energy that he's built, and that stands out to them as well. And that's really what it comes down to, is just the energy from the fans, from the program, coach and staff down. That really does stand out the most to recruits from my experience talking to them.
So that next wave of recruits are coming in. 24, 25, 26, maybe even beyond are going to be at the blue and white game. So it's going to be a packed Beaver Stadium, as Dylan had said. And that, folks, if you're going to be in attendance, you can help with the recruiting, just FYI, based on what we're hearing here. So, or if you're watching, be loud and be proud, because it'll make a difference for those recruits. So names, we're going to have those in just a sec. But first, let's hear from our sponsor of today's episode, and that is Built. Are you looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all of the sugar, calories? Then you got to try the best protein bar ever, and that is Built. You got to try this. And if you're like me, where you want to make healthier snack choices, but you don't want to compromise on all of the taste, that's just the thing for you. Built Bars and Built Puffs. Built Bars are healthy and they taste amazing. Seriously, they taste so amazing you won't think that they're good for you. And what makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. That is right, real chocolate. And they come in unbelievably tasty flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, cookies, and cream. And I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they are healthy, 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar. That's all, with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't got to wait around to get a box for years. We've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com, which you can still do. But now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today. Walk to the pharmacy section. Grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate bar, or coconut puff. And if you're close to a Sam's Club, run in, grab yourself a 13-bar box with hit flavors like brownie batter, puff, and churro puff. You can thank me later. And thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. That is Dylan Callaghan Croley from PennState.Rivals.com, now partnered together with Locked On Nittany Lions. And Locked On Nittany Lions, your go-to podcast for Penn State Rivals. And Penn State Rivals is your go-to source for everything Penn State athletics. Why we brought on the recruiting expert, Dylan, to talk those players that are going to be here. And let's talk about the players that are going to be here first, and then the ones that are of note that are going to be absent. But who should people be excited about that they're interested in coming to be a future Nittany Lion?
Yeah, so I mean, if we extend it kind of into Friday, the list is a little bit bigger, and we're still working over at Penn State Rivals on adding more and more names. This list is going to grow exponentially over the next
It's a lot.
24 to 36 hours. We already have quite a bit of list. But the names that, stick out to me right now, 2024 wide receiver Dre Hawkins, who's down at IMG Academy, a 4-star wide receiver, smaller slot type wide receiver at 5'9". He's probably about 170 pounds right now. But he's been somebody that Penn State's been in a great spot for a while. He's returning to campus this weekend, originally from West Virginia, now at IMG. William Satterwright out of Akron, Ohio, is a guy that they offered earlier this year. He got on campus for a junior day visit, blew that out of the water, and have been in the driver's seat ever since. Now, he has picked up offers from Georgia and Clemson in the last 48 hours. So that makes it, that may slow down the recruitment a little bit. That was somebody we were watching closely coming in this weekend. Same thing with Pope John Paul II out of offensive lineman out of Royersford, Pennsylvania. Kevin Haywood, another offensive lineman Penn State's been in a great spot with for since probably September of last year. He's been all up and down the East Coast over this month, made almost a dozen unofficial visits, I think, since the beginning of the spring, including a bunch over the last 10, 14 days. He'll be back on campus. Don't know if I'm expecting a commitment per se out of him, but that's somebody that I'm watching very closely just as a recruit that's been very high on Penn State for a while. Penn State would love to add him to the class sooner than later, so definitely somebody watching that aspect. 2025 commitments, Jalen Matthews, Amari Gaines will be on campus. 2024 safety of Vabu Torre out of New Jersey, a 3-star safety who's being heavily recruited by both Penn State and Ohio State, will be on campus. That's somebody that is a high priority for them, as well as wide receiver Jason Robinson, who is coming all the way from Long Beach, California. Whenever a kid is making a visit cross-country on their own dime, that stands out to me. We'll see where Penn State stands after that weekend. He's a 4-star recruit, top 50 wide receiver in the country. Another local kid is 2024 offensive lineman Caleb Brewer out of Wyomissing, Pennsylvania, teammate of Javan Williams. He will be on campus this weekend. Somebody Penn State offered earlier this year. I think he's probably in between that first and second tier, but is somebody to watch going forward, depending on how things play out. So those are the big guys right now that stand out to me that I'll be keeping my eye closest on in terms of guys who are coming to campus. But like I said, that list is going to grow quite a bit over the next few days. And before I forget, 2 other prospects are on campus this weekend. 2025 running back Keandre Barker and 2025 wide receiver Quanell Farkan Jr., both out of the Woodlands High School in Texas. 2 guys that really like Penn State, are very high on Penn State. We have future casts in for both of them, even though they're just 2025 prospects early in their recruitment, but both are on campus this weekend. And a commitment this early would be a little surprising, but it's something I'm not ruling out either with those 2 on campus.
Yeah, especially if they have a great weekend, right? The blue and white game is one of the few other ones. There's the Lash Bash that's important for recruiting, but this is very important. It's not just a spring game, as it would seem to be. There's more theatrics to it all. And if you have any questions or comments for us, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll say hello to you, Mike. Thank you for joining the live show. So if you have a question about a prospect, about a player, about just in general, what the impact of recruiting does for Penn State, feel free to ask myself or Dylan during this time. Okay, so the names that are absent. We've seen in the past, I think, for example, Jaden Davis. I know that he's committed to Michigan, but that was huge news a year ago when Penn State did everything in their power to get him onto campus for last year's blue and white game, and he just couldn't make it, decided against it. But are there any situations here where it's Penn State's in the top 5 for somebody or just really vying for their services down the road and they're not going to be there?
I mean, there are guys that they would like to get on campus this weekend that aren't currently planned. Like Michael Van Buren is headed to Oregon, I believe, this weekend.
Yep.
If I'm Penn State, I'm not too concerned about that visit. I think Penn State's in a very good spot for Van Buren. Yes, Oregon has done a great job in that recruitment as well, but the overwhelming consensus right now is that Penn State is in the driver's seat and should feel pretty good. I know he announced a commitment date for July 8th, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if it gets there. I think a commitment could come sooner than that. So while he's on campus, wouldn't be worried about that. One name I haven't been able to confirm whether he'll be on campus or not yet, but let's, for the sake of it right now, assume he won't be since he was just back on campus last weekend, is 4-star linebacker Jalen Harvey. Again, not too concerned that he's not going to be if he does not show up, I would not be too concerned. Another guy that Penn State's in the driver's seat for. But overall, there's nobody I'm really looking at and saying, wow, Penn State's in trouble that he's not getting on campus. He's going elsewhere this weekend. I think Penn State's done a fantastic job in this cycle of putting themselves in a spot with all their key targets in the 2024 class and even some in the 2025 class that one weekend of not making it, even with the blue-white game going on, isn't going to change his recruitment drastically. I think Penn State's in a good spot for most of the guys that won't be on campus this weekend. And we'll be sure to get a thorough list of guys who will be in, those who may be noteworthy and are not making it up this weekend over at Penn State Rivals as well.
And as we move into the final segment, yes, check out pennstate.rivals.com, your go-to source for everything Penn State athletics. But importantly, for this weekend, the fact of you're going to have a thorough list of everyone who's going to be in attendance, so you can see the recruiting profiles, where Penn State stands with them, any future casts that Dylan and others have out. Just to kind of wrap it all up, Dylan, what are you expecting from a more traditional blue and white game? When was the last time that you went to one? Were you there last year or in years past? What do you want to see ultimately from a blue and white game, from the players on the field? Atmosphere is very important. I'm looking forward to it. I'm expecting 80,000, if I'm being honest. If Penn State can put close to 75,000 in this, again, where, well, the defense gets 2 points and you're going to see more drills as opposed to an actual scrimmage versus the first and the second team. And the fact that Penn State was able to get 70,000 plus a year ago, now you have Drew Aller. Now you have a team that is truly in the national championship contention. I very well expect somewhere north of 75,000, almost 80,000. But for you, what do you want to see from specific players or just players as a whole in terms of performance on Saturday?
Yeah, that's a great one. I'm just going to throw it out. I think my prediction for attendance, I'm going to go 82.5. I think that's what they're going to get, 82.5. But what I think would be good to see on Saturday is, one, everybody stay healthy. Penn State cannot afford to lose any key contributors this year, especially if you lose them in the spring game. That would be really tough. We see it across the country every year. Somebody gets hurt in spring practices. The spring game is after the season, has a chance to derail an entire season. So for Penn State, number one, stay healthy. Number two, I think you want to see guys like Drew go out there and have just not flawless efforts, but you want to see them hit all the passes they should, not missing any, easy throws across the middle, overthrowing their targets consistently. You want to see Drew hit the passes he should out of Bo. You want to see that he has the ability to run this offense at a decent clip. I mean, if Drew would go down for some reason this year, they're going to need Bo to step up big time, and expectations would drop a little bit with Bo, but I think Bo is a good enough quarterback that they can still be a 10-win team with him. But you want to see Bo, show what he can do and show those flashes. So I think offensively, those are two big ones. You want to see a guy like Malik McClain show what he has on the field. He'll be one that I'm paying probably the most close attention to out of all the newcomers because I think his ceiling is phenomenal. His size and speed is very hard to find. So I think if he can have not a breakout performance, but a performance that kind of opens your eyes, that would be big for the Nittany Lions. And then I'll just be watching also the true freshmen out there and see what they got. A guy like Tony Rojas, who's been he's been praised quite a bit this offseason by players and coaches. I'll be watching him closely. Elliot Washington in the secondary is somebody who I'll also be watching closely. Another guy who's been praised a ton. And I'm sure I'm missing a couple guys off the top of my head here, but just the newcomers in general. Storm Duck, the transfer DB from North Carolina, another one as well.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'm keeping an eye on, you mentioned you want to avoid players getting injured, bumps and bruises, so I totally understand that. But I also want to see who is missing at this point, right? I've been going to practice now for the last, month or so, few weeks, and it's hard to pinpoint who's present, who is participating, who isn't, unless when Drew Aller's missing, he hasn't been, thank goodness. When some people can sneak in and out of practice that you're like, oh, they are notable, but for the most part, it feels like everyone's been participating, and there hasn't been any other than I would say maybe the tight ends. There were Theo Johnson and Tyler Warren. So I'm going to be looking for players that aren't on the field that should be. Right.
I agree.
And on top of that, I will say this. I'll add a caveat to that as well, Dylan. Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, you are not going to see a lot of them. No. Olu Fashanu, you're not going to see a lot of. Those guys have been practicing. They have been taking reps. I have evidence, video evidence that they are there, and everybody's eyewitness account. But the point that you brought up, you don't want your key players to get injured. And I just named 3 of them right there. Yeah, both running backs and someone's future franchise left tackle. You're not going to see a lot of them in blue and white, but don't think that, it's because they're hurt and we should be worried. It's because they don't want them to get hurt.
Yeah, exactly. I think at the end of the day, the blue-white game and any spring game is really all about having that depth continue to be built and for your young guys to flash what they can do perhaps come the fall. Obviously, it's not a perfect one-to-one. What they do in the spring game isn't going to mean they're going to – if they dominate the spring game, they're not going to necessarily dominate this fall. But you want to see those flashes. You want to see the reason Penn State went out and got some of these guys when they did, whether it was from the recruiting trail of high school or out of the transfer portal. I think at the end of the day, that's what I'm going to be paying most attention to. And obviously what I think a lot of us will be is just how the depth is coming along for Penn State at key positions, like wide receiver. I mean, the top 2 at wide receiver right now, Keandre Lambert-Smith, Harrison Wallace, both we kind of know what they have. Obviously, Dante Cephas isn't on campus yet, but he will be. I believe he's going to be on campus visiting this weekend as well. But obviously, beyond those 2, though, it's a little bit of a question mark of what Penn State actually has there. So I'm going to be watching that closely. Going to be watching the offensive line depth. That's going to be important. The offensive line, somebody's going to go down for a short stretch or medium stretch at some point. It's almost inevitable. Who's going to be able to step up and take those spots? Defensive line, I'm going to be looking at the interior defensive tackle because I think defensively that's where Penn State probably is made or break this season. If they can shore up the DT position, they are going to be in a great spot this fall. If it's a question mark, it's going to be tough to beat the Ohio States and Michigans. And if you get to the college football playoffs, whoever you have to beat there. So those would be the 3 big spots I'm definitely watching on Saturday.
Yeah, I want people to have an understanding that the blue and white game is more about the depth, as you mentioned, because Penn State knows its starters. They don't need to showcase them. They need to protect them more than anything. This is the final spring practice. It's called the blue and white game, but this is the 15th practice that the NCAA allows college football teams to have, and that's why it's a big extravaganza. So for Penn State, you want to see those true freshmen that have enrolled early. How are they coming along? Those key battles for the third wide receiver, or maybe it's the backup center, or maybe it's the right tackle, because they alluded to that between a Caden Wallace and a Drew Shelton. So those position battles, and then just it really is rounding out the second and third teams. This is one of the most important days for younger players on the team and guys that are really trying to carve out some additional reps. This is the last thing I want to leave people with, Dylan, is that I think the defense is going to have a pretty good day against the offense. This is a defense that was already one of the best in all of college football last year. And then on top of that, you're getting a new quarterback. The offensive line is the best that it's been, but I'm saying that, and I'm not saying, I know the hot takes are going to come out. Drew Aller didn't have a good game. Bo Prabula didn't have a good blue and white game. That's just how good the defense is. Iron sharpens iron. They're going to make them so much better for the fall. But I'm fully anticipating that there's just going to be some beat writers that are going to be, should we be concerned about Drew Aller? No, because it's a Manny Diaz defense for 2 second-year quarterbacks with all these veterans that came back, Adisa Isaac, and you have Chop Robinson returning, and Curtis Jacobs, and we know what Abdul Carter can do, Zane Durant, that entire secondary. You bring in Storm Duck. Like, this is a veteran-laden defense that is going to be top 10, maybe even top 5 in all of the nation this upcoming season.
100% agree. At the end of the day, this is a defense that, yes, they lost key guys like Joey Porter Jr. and Jair Brown. But luckily for Penn State, the secondary is probably their deepest position on the entire roster. So while it's hard to place those guys, I think they'll be successful and doing a good job at that. But offensively, they lost a lot of key guys. Yes, they bring back the fantastic running back duo, but you lost Parker Washington, Mitchell Tinsley, Brennan Strange. Those are your three best wide receiver or three best receivers from last year. That's hard to replace. So the defense is absolutely going to have the advantage, I think, on Saturday. But going up against this Penn State defense, this Manny Diaz defense, every day in practice this spring, and then once we hit fall camp, is only going to make this offense better. And I think it's going to pay. You're going to see that pay off when they go up against the tougher defenses on their schedule next fall.
Yeah, so pump the brakes a little bit about any criticism of the offense, because it's still a work in progress, but I think they will be that much better when West Virginia and September roll around. That's going to do it for this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Your go-to podcast now for PennState.Rivals.com. Everything you need to know about Penn State athletics is over there, along with Dylan Callaghan Croley, our special guest today, talking about recruiting. Dylan, I appreciate your perspective. Where can people just keep up with everything, and what do you have on the horizon that you want to share?
Yeah, you can keep up with us at PennState.Rivals.com, of course, Happy Valley Insider. You can follow me at I actually just recently changed my Twitter handle in the last 24 hours to Rivals Dylan CC. So a little bit easier to find me now, but you can find me there. Find me at Happy Valley Insider as well. And in terms of upcoming content over there, we'll have a ton of spring game content as well. But honestly, probably focusing more on the recruiting side of things. I've been hearing good things for Penn State, that it could be a fun next couple of days for the Nittany Lions. Wouldn't be surprised if there are a couple of commitments along the way over the weekend. And coming out after this, heading all the way into June, it should be a fun 2.5 months or so for Penn State on the recruiting trail.
All right, Penn State kicks off the blue and white game, 2:00 Saturday, April 15th. Dylan, you and I will have all the coverage over on PennState.Rivals.com and here on Locked On Nittany Lions.